மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. Thank you.
Things can work for the rooks only if there are open files for these pieces and a chance for the pieces for the rooks to create threats, usually against the enemy king in most of the cases. So therefore the presence of queens is in favor of the rooks in most of the cases, like it was in the game Shirov with the white pieces against Morovic Fernandez from the Las Palmas tournament 1994. In this situation, Shirov goes rook to h8, he is improving his pieces and he is starting to create threats against the king on g8, and he is going to combine the play on the king's flank with attempts to open the position on the queen side as well. After rook h8, bishop c6, a key move which was played in the game was the one f3, which is not giving a chance for the second player to block the position. Say after bishop takes c6, knight takes c6, black is going to place his knight on d5, and then more or less he is going to secure the position on either flank. The knight on d5 is controlling the situation in the center, but also in case that white tries to play a move like b3, there will be always a move c3, keeping the things closed, and only one open file would hardly be enough for the first player to win on the king side. But f3 makes it difficult for the second player to defend. Morovic continued with knight b to d5, and Shirov considers this to be a mistake. Instead he suggested in the post-mortem the move king d7, but in that case also after king e2 white is having the better prospects. Say bishop g7, rook h7, now knight d5, and then rook e1. The play is going to be quite similar to the one that we're about to see in the game. Knight d5, now king f2, and this time king d7 would be met with rook e to h1. The difference is that now the rook is coming on h7, and after b4 this attack on the queen side is too slow. White is playing queen g5, and he is waiting for his opponent to make the next move. In fact, it might appear that the move c3 is just opening the files for the white pieces. After b takes c3, the queen can come, for instance, on c1, and after that switch to the queen's flank to attack the pawn on a7 and to attack the square on d6. So black has to be very careful when advancing the pawns, as it is weakening his position. And in this line, if he takes on c3 with the knight, then things are also looking good for white. He will take on c6, king is forced to take on c6, and one idea that you should be always very aware of when you have the two rooks is to sacrifice one of them for one of the light pieces of the opponent and to try and go into a favorable endgame, an endgame with a passed pawn and an active rook. Say here after rook g7, queen g7 would be answered queen f6. Black cannot take the queen as this pawn would be promoted. If he cannot take the queen, knight f5 will have to give up the important pawn on e6, after which white is having decisive attack with his queen and rook. And in this line, if instead taking on g7 black plays knight e4 check, then king g2, knight takes g5 is leading to loss of a knight after the move rook h7, well calculated by Shirov. On move number 26, black is naturally not forced to advance the pawn. He can advance, for instance, the a5 pawn, the a pawn, but then king e1 would be the key move as suggested by Shirov. The idea is to take on d5 on the next move, and if the knight takes it, there will be queen h6, using the pin along the 7th rank, while if the bishop takes it, then the winning move, the winning idea is going to be the one that we have already seen. Rook takes g7 followed by queen f6 with decisive advantage in the endgame. None of this happened in the game, but the move was knight b4 instead of b4. Move number 23, instead of king d7, knight b4 was played. And here a3 is the move, making use of the fact that there is no time for bishop e4, as the pawn would take on b4, and this will discover the a file for the second rook, which is leading to win for white. After bishop f5, queen g5. Now queen g7 would be answered rook e to h1, while knight c6 would be answered in a familiar way, queen to f6, trading queens, as this time white is having another open file, and on the second open file he is going to attack the knight, take the a7 pawn, and the two rooks united with the pawn, together with the pawn, will be creating mating threats. Finally, in this line, if on move number 26 black defends with knight c8, then the problem would be queen h6, attacking not only on the king's flank and blocking the white pieces, but intending to bring the decisive reinforcements with rook a6 or rook a5, either to win this pawn or to bring the rook even closer and to finish the blocking of, say, king e7, queen h4 check, king d7, and the familiar trick, queen to f6, after which white is winning. Black is completely helpless against the pieces flooding into his camp. Say king f7, rook c6, and white starts to collect the material. This knight is already trapped. Knight b6 is still a move, but then check, and this pawn and this bishop, everything would be hanging, so he would be losing at least a light piece. And the course of the game saw knight to d3 check, to which Shirov takes it. And now, not only that he wins the pawn, this is not bad at all. Of course, this is a healthy extra pawn, and he will have now two pawns in addition to the two rooks versus the three light pieces. But more importantly, he has opened the c file, and he is repeating the idea that we have seen, as if black just stands, he cannot stop all the white pieces flooding into his camp. Say king d7, queen h3, h7 is the threat, and bishop e7 is answered, queen h7. Then black cannot deviate from the trade of the queens, as otherwise he is getting checkmated with queen g8. Therefore, in the game, he preferred to trade the queens immediately with queen f5. But this time, the endgame is won for the first player. Compare it with the previous one, how much life the rooks have at the moment, how active they are. First of all, this one is taking the pawn on d3, and after that it is going on the open file. From here it is ready to enter the 7th rank, to take further on pawns, and this one is strongly supporting it from the other side, so the win is relatively easy. Bishop c6, king e3, sorry, knight c6 was played, not bishop c6, but knight c6, king e3, king f7, rook h7 check. And one last method for you to remember is that you can easily switch the rooks from one side to another, and when the moment comes you can actually trade one of the rooks for the enemy light piece. That's something that we have seen already, and here it is also working, as white managed to collect two pawns. That's something that we are going to discuss in a minute, about the rook and a pawn, rook and pawns versus two light pieces. But I will tell you from now that that's usually favorable for the side with the rook when there is endgame. King g6 was played in the game, rook c2, knight e5, rook c7, pawn is moving on a6, but then rook e7, knight c4 check, king e2, e5, b3, knight is excluded on the a3 square, rook c8, bishop h6. Just check, white didn't have to sacrifice anything. He managed to cut this king on the edge of the board, and checkmate is coming next with g3 and rook takes h6. So black resigned. So if you have the two rooks, the main thing that you need to remember is that they're enjoying the presence of queens. on the board, and you need to give them enough operative space to play on both the flanks to create threats on both the king side and the queen side, and ideally against the king as well.
மறக்காம சர்ப்ரைஸ் பண்ணுங்க. தேங்க்யூ.